Greeting. Welcome, dear traveler, to a moonlit grove of ancient story. Under whispering oak boughs and the soft glow of stars, we invite you to step beyond the veil of time. Here, myths breathe like dawn mist over still waters. Here, the goddess Artemis roams eternal. In this sacred space, let the world fall silent and your imagination awaken. Greetings. Come walk with us into the wilderness of legend, where a timeless huntress awaits. In the hush of this enchanted night, Artemis stands before us as our guide and muse. She is the goddess of the hunt, of the wilderness and wild creatures, of chastity and childbirth, and the fierce protector of women and young girls. Twin sister to Apollo and daughter of Zeus and Leto, Artemis's presence is both gentle and fearsome, a moonlit arrow poised on the bow of eternity. Ancient poets called her Paitaunui Ode Alpha Thetateronu, mistress of animals, for she dances among forest beasts and guards the young and helpless. Artists often picture her accompanied by a stag or hounds, swift and graceful. Yet behind the silvery crescent in her hair lies a paradox. She is the nurturer and the hunter, the virgin and the midwife, the bringer of sudden death and the savior of the innocent. Our story tonight will trace the mythological journey of Artemis, from her miraculous birth, through her legendary deeds and trials, to the philosophical legacy she leaves in our hearts. Prepare for a poetic odyssey through Artemis's world, rich with well-known tales and lesser-known secrets that glimmer like hidden stars. Let the curtains of time part, and let Artemis emerge in all her wild, untamed grandeur. Narrative of Artemis history. Divine birth and sacred twin. Every story has a beginning, and Artemis's begins before she is even born, in the tenuous refuge of her mother, Leto. Pursued relentlessly by the jealous Hera, the laboring Leto found sanctuary on the floating Isle of Delos, which Zeus secured for her. There, beneath a solitary palm tree, Leto gave birth to Artemis, who arrived just before her twin brother Apollo. It is said that Artemis was born first and, even as an infant, helped her mother deliver Apollo, acting as a divine midwife for her own twin. In that moment, Artemis was bound to the mysteries of birth and life, child of a difficult labor, yet bringer of ease to others' travail. As the first light of the twins' life fell upon Delos, the island blossomed with golden flowers and newborn. Artemis gazed up at Zeus with clear, fearless eyes. From her father Zeus, Artemis won a promise that would shape her eternity. When she was but a young girl, some legends say only 3 years old, when she climbed onto Zeus's knee, Artemis boldly asked for gifts. Grant me to remain forever a maiden, free and untamed. Let me roam the wild woods with my bow and my arrows, in the company of nymphs who are my sisters. Give me the mountains as my playground, and one city to honor me. Zeus smiled at the precocious child and granted her wish. He gave her a band of Oceanid nymphs as companions and hunting dogs swift as the wind. He placed into her small hands a silver bow and quiver of arrows, forged by Hephaestus and the Cyclopes, tools that would announce her as the peerless huntress of Olympus. And so Artemis pledged herself to perpetual chastity and independence, an eternal girlhood dedicated not to marriage but to the freedom of the wild. Mistress of the wilderness, Artemis grew swiftly into her divine powers. Picture her striding through the emerald forests of Arcadia, the morning breeze in her braided hair and a quiver rattling gently at her back. She wears a short tunic hitched at the knee, the garb of a huntress, freeing her to run like the wind. The wilderness is her cathedral. In the hush before dawn, you might glimpse her silvery silhouette beside a forest pool, or hear the rustle of leaves as she passes. All the creatures of the wild know her presence. The stag lifts its head when she draws near, recognizing its goddess. The wolf trots at her heel like a faithful hound. Artemis embodies the wild spirit itself. She is at once the hunter and the guardian of the hunted. The Greeks knew her as a paradox, the one who slays the deer, yet also protects the young fawns in the springtime. In the epic Iliad, she is called Omicron Alpha Alpha, Iakira, the arrow pourer, for her arrows fly as swift and numerous as moonbeams through the night. By moonlight, Artemis's character shines in another guise. Later mythology linked her to Selene the moon, and indeed when the full moon rides high, Some imagine it is Artemis's glowing chariot crossing the sky. Under this gentle lunar light, the goddess of the hunt shows a softer face, a calm protector, wandering with her maidens, singing and dancing in shadowy groves. Nature rejoices in her dance. Trees sprout fresh leaves and nymphs of the woods join hands with her. In one hand, Artemis carries a torch, symbol of her guiding light in dark places, and in the other, her bow, symbol of the keen focus with which she safeguards the natural world. So attuned is she to the wild that even the winds obey Artemis. Many a time, travelers at sea would pray to her for a safe voyage, and hunters would whisper a request for game in her name. To the agrarian Greeks, she was also a goddess of vegetation and the fruitful earth, who could either nurture the crops or let wild nature reclaim the lands. Yet woe to the mortal who fails to respect the delicate balance Artemis maintains. She fiercely guards the purity of her domains, both the untamed woods and the innocence of maidenhood. To follow Artemis is to tread lightly, reverently, through the wild. Those who trespass with greed or pride may find themselves in the sights of her bow. Wrath and mercy, tales of Artemis's vengeance. Artemis's wrath is proverbial in myth, sudden and sharp as the arrow she looses. One famous tale of warning is that of Queen Niobe. Niobe of Thebes, proud of her large family, once boasted that she was superior to Artemis's mother Leto, who had only 2 children. Why? I have borne 12, or in some tellings, 14, robust sons and daughters, Niobe bragged, while Leto has but Artemis and Apollo. Surely I am more worthy of worship than Leto. Upon hearing this blasphemy against their mother, Artemis and Apollo's eyes blazed with anger. Swift as a falcon, they swooped down upon Niobe's children to exact divine retribution. Apollo drew his golden bow and shot down Niobe's sons where they stood, one after another, as they practiced athletics in a sunlit field. In horror, Niobe gathered her daughters and begged for mercy, but Artemis's face was cold as marble. The virgin Huntress notched arrow after arrow and slew Niobe's daughters, one by one. Only when the last child fell silent did the twin archers stay their hands. Niobe's pride had turned to ashes. She was left with no children at all, her once loud household fallen deathly quiet. Overcome with grief, Niobe herself turned into stone, a statue of a weeping mother eternal. And on Mount Sipylus in Phrygia, legend says a rock weeps with Niobe's tears to this day. Through this tragic tale, Artemis's unyielding defense of her mother's honor and the consequences of hubris were seared into cultural memory. She may nurture, but she will not tolerate arrogance before the gods. Another myth speaks to the inviolable privacy and chastity Artemis demands. The young hunter. Actaeon learned this when fate led him to a sacred clearing deep in the woods, a place no man was ever meant to see. There, in a misty spring, Artemis was bathing with her attendant nymphs, free of her hunting garb, laughing in the languid air. Actaeon, wandering by chance or by cruel design of destiny, pushed aside the leafy branches and stumbled upon the goddess in her naked glory. Shock and anger flared in Artemis's eyes at this unforgivable violation of her privacy. With one fierce glance, she transformed Actaeon into a stag, the very creature he'd often hunted. In terror, Actaeon bounded away on 4 legs. But his own pack of hunting hounds caught his scent. Not recognizing their master in this form, the dogs gave chase. Actaeon, now a splendid stag with the mind of a man, ran for his life through the woods he once roamed confidently. The hounds closed in, snarling, and tore him to pieces while Artemis looked on without mercy. In one fell stroke, the hunter became the hunted. Thus Artemis ensured no man would ever boast of glimpsing her body and live. Yet, contemplate the dual nature of her reaction. Savage punishment, yes, but also a kind of mercy. Actaeon was silenced before he could tell what he saw, sparing both goddess and mortal from a greater dishonor. His death was swift, a finality that preserved the sanctity of Artemis's maidenhood. Through Actaeon's grim fate, we learn that Artemis brooks no transgression of her personal sovereignty. The wild has rules, and those rules are hers to enforce. Not all who cross Artemis meet brutal ends. Sometimes her mercy shines through the cracks of her anger. There is the tale of Callisto, one of Artemis's own nymph companions. Callisto was a sweet Arcadian girl, devoted to the goddess's vows of chastity. But her beauty caught the eye of Zeus, who disguised himself as Artemis to approach her. In that deceptive form, Zeus seduced or violated Callisto, and she became pregnant. When Artemis discovered Callisto's condition, her heart broke at the betrayal. In some versions of the myth, Artemis, enraged and hurt, transforms Callisto into a bear as punishment for breaking her vow. In others, it is jealous Hera who turns the girl into a beast, and Artemis, unwitting, later kills the bear during a hunt. Yet even in these cruel outcomes, there is a glimmer of compassion. Zeus, pitying his unfortunate lover, swept the bear up into the heavens, creating the constellation Ursa Major, and later placed Callisto's son Arcus as Ursa Minor, so that mother and child would shine together among the stars. The night sky thus bears witness to Artemis's unforgiving pride, as well as the enduring memory of those who fell victim to fate. The story of Callisto reminds us that even those dearest to Artemis are not exempt from her high standards. A sobering reflection on principle versus compassion. Artemis chooses the way of principle, however painful, embodying the idea that purity of purpose must be preserved, though the cost may be tragic. Artemis in war and sacrifice. As a goddess deeply intertwined with nature's cycles of life and death, Artemis often found herself entangled in the affairs of both mortals and gods. During the saga of the Trojan War, her influence loomed large at a crucial moment. On the eve of the Greeks' voyage to Troy, the great king, Agamemnon, committed a grave offense. He killed a sacred stag in Artemis's grove and boastfully declared himself a better hunter than the goddess. In swift retribution, Artemis stilled the winds at the port of Aulis, halting the Greek fleet in becalmed waters. The soldiers grew restless. Without wind, they could not sail to war. The seer Calchas divined that. Artemis demanded a heavy price for appeasement, the sacrifice of Agamemnon's own daughter, the young Iphigenia. With a heavy heart, Agamemnon agreed, and Iphigenia was led to the altar. But just as the knife was poised to claim the innocent life, Artemis intervened in a miracle of mercy. The goddess swept Iphigenia away in a whirlwind and left a gentle deer in her place on the altar. In one version, Iphigenia was carried off to distant Taurus, Crimea, to serve as Artemis's priestess, spared from death. In another telling, Artemis grants the girl immortality as one of her attendants. The Greeks, seeing the sacrificial deer and taking it as a sign Artemis was appeased, departed Aulis with the winds now filling their sails. Through this episode, Artemis revealed herself as both vengeful and benevolent. She orchestrated the test of Agamemnon's loyalty and humility, yet showed compassion to the innocent by saving Iphigenia. Artemis's principles demanded respect and atonement, but once honored, her wrath gave way to grace. During the Trojan War itself, Artemis stood on the side of Troy, reflecting the allegiance of her twin Apollo, who was patron of the city. On the battlefield of gods, the Theomachy in Homer's Iliad, Artemis even confronted Hera, the queen of the gods. Proud Artemis, driving her moonlit chariot, dared to challenge Hera's might, but Hera, indignant at the younger goddess's audacity, seized Artemis's own bow and struck her with it. Bold and shameless girl, Hera scolded. Asterisk, Zeus made you a lion only against women. Better to hunt in the wild woods than face one stronger than you. Asterisk, Hera's blow sent Artemis reeling. Her arrows spilled, and she fled in tears to Zeus's side, while her mother Leto gathered up the fallen bough. It was a rare moment of humiliation for Artemis, reminding us that even the fiercest, virginal goddess must yield to the greater cosmic order of Olympus. Yet, true to form, Artemis did not retaliate with futile rage. She withdrew with dignity intact, her silence perhaps more powerful than any retort. In the end, Troy fell not by any failing of Artemis or Apollo, but by fate and mortal folly. Artemis's role in that great war shows her as a protector of those she favors, like Troy and its heroes, and an unflinching punisher when she is dishonored. A deity who can determine the very winds of war, and yet who knows when to retreat and let fate run its course. Lesser-known tales and sacred cults. Beyond the famous epics, Artemis's mythos is rich with lesser-known tales and local legends that paint a fuller picture of her character. In the rugged island of Crete, for instance, we find the story of Artemis. This shy mountain nymph, whose name means sweet maiden, was a favorite companion of Artemis. Together they hunted the Cretan forests. But Artemis caught the eye of King Minos, who became obsessed with her beauty. For 9 long months, Minos pursued the fleeing nymph across Crete. Artemis, desperate to preserve her chastity and escape Minos's grasp, finally leapt off a high cliff into the sea. Instead of perishing, she fell into the nets of fishermen. For indeed it was as if Artemis guided her leap, and was carried safely across the waters. Artemis, relieved and grateful for her friend's escape, deified Artemis, granting her immortality as a goddess. Ever after, Artemis was revered as Dictina, goddess of the nets and of the sea's bounty, and also identified with Aphia on the island of Aegina. Here, Artemis showed a tender side, rewarding a mortal who upheld the same virtues. Artemis holds dear chastity and independence by elevating her to divine status. The tale of Artemis is quietly kept in the corners of Artemis's story, a testament to the loyalty between the goddess and her companions, and a reminder that Artemis's protection can reach even those dangling on the edge of a cliff. In the forests of Arcadia, another myth whispers of Artemis's empathy. The twin giants Otis and Ephialtes, the Elodie, once sought to storm Olympus and dared to seek Artemis and Hera as wives. To stop these rampaging brothers, Artemis employed not brute force, but cleverness. She transformed herself into a white deer and darted between them. The overly proud giants, not wanting the other to claim the prize, cast their spears simultaneously and struck each other down, slain by their own hands. Artemis the Huntress won the day without firing an arrow. Such tales underscore her cunning and intelligence, the ability to turn an enemy's strengths against them. Artemis's influence extended into the very rites and cults of ancient Greece, where different cities worshipped unique aspects of the goddess. In Sparta, she was honored as Artemis Orthia, and the Spartans performed one of the most brutal rituals in her name, the Diamastagosis, where young men were flogged at her altar, a test of endurance and discipline. Blood flowed as an offering to the stern Huntress, reflecting the belief that Artemis demanded strength and resilience from her followers. In Broron, a sanctuary in Attica, Artemis was revered as the protector of young girls. There, a delightful, if mysterious, ritual called the Arctia took place. Athenian maidens, before reaching puberty, served the goddess by playing the bear. They donned saffron-colored robes and danced as if they were frolicking bear cubs. This strange custom harkened back to a local legend. A tame bear once dwelt in Broron, beloved by Artemis. When the bear was killed by a man after it injured a girl, Artemis demanded atonement. Hence, the girls must symbolically become bears to please the goddess. Through this playful yet profound ritual, young girls underwent a rite of passage under Artemis's guidance, shedding their childhood like the bear sheds its fur in preparing for the wild unknown of adulthood. It was Artemis's way of nurturing the growth of women, in line with her role as overseer of childbirth and protector of women in their vulnerable moments. Even beyond Greece, Artemis's legacy took fascinating forms. In the city of Ephesus in Anatolia, she was worshipped as a many-breasted mother goddess, a stark contrast to the Greek virgin Huntress. The famous Artemis of Ephesus statue, adorned with what looked like countless breasts or ritual bull sacrifices, symbolized fertility and abundance. This Artemis was the Lady of Plenty, embodying the nourishment of the earth. How curious that the virginal sister of Apollo is so different from the nurturing, many-breasted Artemis of Ephesus. Yet it speaks to Artemis's universal adaptability. To the women of Ephesus, she was primarily a giver of life, while to the Greeks, she was a protector of the untamed. Both aspects share a deep truth. Artemis stands for the continuity of life, whether through protecting the young and the weak, or ensuring fertile cycles of nature. The Lafria festival in Patras honored this life and death power of Artemis. There, worshippers would hurl live animals, deer, boars, birds, into a huge fire as offerings, The goddess of the wild received their living essence in flame, a dramatic annual sacrifice symbolizing nature's fiery renewal. Such were the varied and sometimes contradictory faces of Artemis. In different lands, each adding a brushstroke to her portrait, the unyielding virgin, the midwife and healer, the bloodthirsty patron of sacrifices, the bountiful mother of nature's riches. The philosophical essence of Artemis. Beyond the vivid stories and rituals, Artemis invites us to reflect on deeper themes: independence, purity, the duality of nurture and destruction, and our own connection to nature. She embodies the idea of independence with absolute clarity. Artemis answers to no husband, no lover, no authority but her father and her own inner compass. In a pantheon filled with marriage alliances and tangled love affairs, Artemis stands apart as the self-possessed maiden, one who defines her identity wholly by her own values and choices. This can inspire us modern mortals to consider the value of personal autonomy, to remain true to oneself against societal pressures. Artemis reminds us that there is strength and wholeness in being comfortable alone, in the wilderness of our thoughts, under our personal moonlight. Her chastity, often misunderstood, is not merely a physical state, but a symbol of purity of purpose. Artemis channels all her energy into protecting life's sanctity, whether it's the innocence of a child, the harmony of an ecosystem, or the sanctity of a vow. In remaining a virgin, she keeps her focus undiluted, her bow ever aimed at her noble targets. Philosophically, this speaks to the power of focus and dedication. What do we choose to devote ourselves to, and what distractions do we reject? Artemis's life is an allegory for the strength found in self-discipline and clarity of intention. Yet Artemis is not a gentle, naive spirit removed from the harsh realities. Far from it. She is the wilderness in all its beauty and brutality. She illustrates the duality of nurture and destruction inherent in nature itself. One moment, she is the soft nurse of the wild, helping a lost cub find its mother, easing the pains of a woman in labor, or cooling a feverish child with a healing herb. The next moment, she is the silent predator, the glint of fang or arrow in the dark, dealing out death as a natural part of life's cycle. Think of how a forest fire, though devastating, clears the way for new growth. Artemis's actions often follow this pattern of necessary destruction. For instance, in punishing Niobe's arrogance, she annihilates an entire family. Cruel, yes. But from that tragedy sprang eternal lessons on humility and reverence. In demanding Iphigenia and then sparing her, Artemis tested and ultimately restored the moral order before a great conflict. She is often the agent of karma in myth, ensuring transgressions against nature or the gods are repaid. However, unlike senseless wrath, Artemis's anger usually has a moral and cosmic purpose. Thus, she symbolizes the idea that true justice, like nature, can be harsh yet purposeful. The wilderness cares nothing for human hubris. It will shelter you or slay you depending on how you respect its laws. In Artemis, we see a personification of that principle. Artemis also embodies our connection to nature and the wild within ourselves. In an age when people lived closer to forests and beasts, she was the reassurance that someone was watching over the dark woods at night. Today, in a world often distant from nature, Artemis calls us back to our primal roots. She asks us to remember the moonlit nights, the rustle of leaves, the thrill of discovery in untamed places, outside us and within us. She is that part of the human psyche that craves freedom, adventure, and solitude. When you stand under a big silvery moon in a silent forest clearing and feel simultaneously awe and peace, perhaps it is Artemis moving in your soul. Her philosophical essence encourages balance, to cultivate gentleness and strength, to uphold innocence yet understand the necessity of endings, to run free yet remain principled. In Artemis's story, the wilderness is not just a backdrop, it is a teacher. The forest symbolizes life itself, dense, mysterious, full of peril and wonder. Artemis, the forest daughter, teaches us to navigate life with courage, respect, and awe. In contemplating Artemis, we find a mirror to profound truths: the need for respect, for ourselves, for others, for nature's limits. the importance of staying true to one's core values, the understanding that life and death dance together in every heartbeat of the wild. As the protector of women and childbirth, Artemis also stands for the power of the feminine, not in opposition to the masculine, but as a force of its own. She cherishes what is innocent and pure, yet she is ferocious when that is threatened. In a way, Artemis presides over the thresholds of life, the moment of birth, the transition from girlhood to womanhood, the thin line between survival and death in the hunt. She is there in all of those liminal spaces, a torch-bearing guardian lighting the way. Call to action. Our journey with Artemis may be drawing to a close, but the echoes of her arrows and the soft pad of her footsteps linger in the air. If this odyssey into the ancient wilds has inspired you, join our circle of storytellers. Like this narrative if it spoke to the wild heart in you. Subscribe or follow for more mythological journeys, so you'll never miss an adventure under the stars. And around our virtual campfire, we invite you to share your voice. Comment below with your favorite mythological figure, whether it's a legendary king or warrior, a fearsome demon or radiant angel, a crafty trickster or a fantastical creature. Who among the legends calls to your spirit, as Artemis does to the moonlit night? Let us celebrate this tapestry of myths together and keep their wisdom alive. Your engagement fuels these tales, much as belief once fueled the gods themselves. Farewell message. As the first light of dawn now peeks through the trees, it is time to bid farewell. We leave Artemis in her forest realm, a solitary figure standing proud on a high ridge, watching over the world she loves. In parting, take a moment to feel the dew on your skin and the cool breath of the morning wind that carries her essence. Farewell, dear friend, and may the spirit of Artemis guide you. May you walk with courage, independence, and reverence on your own path. Until we meet again under the ancient oaks, keep the wild alive in your heart.